Did you enjoy it? The little break from No Man's Sky discussions? Well, it's back. Temporarily. I swear I want to be done with it, and I think this will be the last one. I think. Let me just pull a Sean Murray. Yeah, it's the last one. Yeah, currently it is. Anyway, last time we talked about No Man's Sky, I put the worst part of its fanbase on blast. I also put the game's media on blast, and hype culture at large on blast. But there was something left out of the equation, and that's the studio itself, the maker of No Man's Sky, Hello Games. Well, it's time for them to get their day in court. I took some time with this because there are two very distinct versions of events. When you look at social media, when you look at blog posts, when you look at videos, when you look at articles, essays, hot takes, what have you. Some people have very different ideas as to what Hello Games' role has been in the No Man's Sky debacle. And I think at this point we can call it a debacle. It's time for the Jimquisition to weigh in, so here we go. Did Hello Games lie in the years leading up to No Man's Sky's release? This is the question that's been rattling around in my head since the game's launch, a question that I've been giving a ton of thought as I realised that despite wanting to close the book on a game I really didn't find all that interesting, I just had to go back for one last pass and finally stick my oar in the raging debate of just how much of a No Man's lie the final product turned out to be. I said No Man's lie, like everyone else has said. I'm not calling this video No Man's Lie. There's literally 10 million videos on YouTube called No Man's Lie. I'm gonna come up with something different. Won't be as clever or catchy, but it will at least be original. Be mine. It'll be mine. There are two common and popular narratives running strong throughout the continued discussion of No Man's Sky. One narrative says that hype and expectation around the game had nothing to do with Hello Games, that it was just the press and the public whipping themselves into a frenzy, while Hello was only ever truthful in their presentation of the game. The second narrative claims the complete opposite, that Hello Games, especially director Sean Murray, were lying through their teeth during No Man's Sky's promotion, promising tons of features that never made it in, and they've only continued to sell the game under false pretenses. Two stories with wildly different plots, and I have every reason to think both sides genuinely believe what they're saying, but can both be right? Certainly not if we're looking at the most extreme presentations of the stories, but maybe we can pull apart this whole stringy mess and try to come to some sort of conclusion. I mean, at least as far as this show's concerned, the internet at large is going to be talking about this one for quite some time. Angrily and furiously. Probably while jacking it. It's difficult to pin down a lot of what was said about the game and its relation to the game itself because of just how vague a lot of the marketing was. Hell, the game's pretty vague too, nebulous and unclear in its intent a lot of the time. Murray himself is particularly good at speaking in hypotheticals, in stating things not as ironclad facts but non-committal trains of thought. Much of the content people expected to be in No Man's Sky was not officially, objectively, explicitly promised in promotion material. It was instead hinted at, offered, implied, sometimes just confirmed casually, nonchalantly when some interviewer asked about it. Now, is that enough to protect one from accusations of dishonesty? I don't think so, especially with that latter part. Instead, a portion of the blame for No Man's Sky's unearthly expectations simply has to be carried by Hello Games, who at the very least allowed such rampant and ambitious ideas to grow among the fanbase unchecked, rarely discouraging the wild speculation, and sometimes actively encouraging it through this convenient veil of ambiguity. The biggest and most definitive example of dishonesty critics have dug up is that notorious multiplayer promise. Though primarily tagged as a solo experience, Sean Murray did say other players could meet each other in-game. In interviews as recent as this year, Murray wouldn't deny online interactions. He downplayed it a hell of a lot at times, but just couldn't bring himself to put the absolute kibosh on it. He said player-to-player interaction would be rare, not impossible. As obfuscating and slippery as his words can be, he is talking about player interactions. He is saying it can occur.
But actually going to a planet and another player being in the same space at the same time is incredibly rare. And it's something that, depending on how many people play the game, might not even happen, basically.
Can you run into other people, other players on the game?
Yes, but the chances of that are incredibly rare, just because of the size of what we're building.
The problem is, of course, that the final product appears to not have player interaction as a rarity, but instead a definitive impossibility. Infamously, 2 players live-streamed themselves in the exact same location, at the exact same time, and could not see each other at all. Not a trace of the other's existence. Not even a Dark Souls-style glimmer of somebody else being nearby. The response from Hello Games? More vagary, more downplaying, dodging the questions altogether. No explicit confirmation, no explicit denial, just fluff. While that's the most concrete example of reality not living up to the dream, it's far from the only one. An equally notorious list of missing features surfaced on Reddit in the days following No Man's Sky's launch, laboriously documenting and sourcing claims made by Hello Games over the years and their appearance, or lack thereof, in the finished product. The original poster would remove this list, only for it to be archived and reposted by others, but even mirrors of the original post seem to be going up and down like a bloody yo-yo. A website dedicated to preserving this list, One Man's Lie, has an archived snapshot of the original post, though it's missing a number of edits and corrections that came out when it was published. The list had to be edited a lot after its initial posting, which speaks volumes about the vagary surrounding the game. Even people knee-deep in it aren't quite sure what's genuine and what's not. Things like butterflies and rivers, believed initially to be missing from the game despite promises, were later confirmed to be there by players who'd witnessed them. I'd seen a few butterflies myself, actually. Meanwhile, the jury's still out on a number of things people were led to expect. Complicated ecosystems with planet-exclusive elements, advanced crafting mechanics based on player experimentation, different playstyles that involve never setting foot on a planet or living solely as a trader without all the resource shit. The list is exhaustive and exhausting to read, and while some of the statements turned out to be true, or at least not explicitly false, there is an undeniable bunch of stuff that never made it into the game. Stuff that Sean and company did talk about, did mention, and did not ever deny the existence of, even when 0 Hour came and went and people had the game in their hands. When one pours through the evidence, one has to conclude a very real truth. No Man's Sky is nowhere near as complex, varied and nuanced as Hello Games suggested it would be. We have statement after statement in interview after interview about things said to be in the game, ways in which the game will work that never manifested in the final release. Even if you love No Man's Sky, and more power to you, I feel you have to admit that whether deliberately or not, Hello Games was misleading on more than one occasion. Heck of a lot of occasions, actually. If we can agree on that, and I'm sure some of you won't, but I'll leave you behind for now, if we can agree on that, a new set of questions opens up. Does the inaccurate marketing matter? Is it bad? If it is bad, exactly how bad is it? Let's toss out an example of misleading marketing that ended up not mattering. This is early footage of BioShock Infinite. As you can see here, it contains content that clearly never made it into the final product. Some of this stuff even makes it look like quite the different experience to the one we got. However, rarely if ever is this brought up. Rarely if ever is director Ken Levine called a liar. The guy's called a lot of things, but a liar ain't one of them, in general. There's a very simple reason for that. BioShock Infinite was good. Not objectively, of course, but the common consensus was that it didn't disappoint. It was critically acclaimed, it was loved by most BioShock fans, myself included, and those who did hate the game tended to hate it for reasons far removed from its marketing. For an example of misleading marketing that actually did matter, we can look no further than my favourite bugbear, Aliens Colonial Marines. Randy Pitchford has become the personification of dishonesty to many who felt cheated and lied to by the highly scripted demos, the highly doctored screenshots, and the many false claims from Randy and friends about what a passion project this game was. Such a passion project that Gearbox had farmed out most of the work to a totally different studio, and what made this matter more than anything else was the fact that, ultimately, Colonial Marines was shit. Like, really, really shit. One of the shittest Alien games ever made, and that's fucking saying something. Beyond just shit, it was an insult to a beloved science fiction establishment. Fact is, you can get away with misleading marketing provided the end result is still good enough. And of course, not all marketing is explicitly deliberately dishonest. Some features are genuinely intended to be in a game but end up cut for creative, financial, or technical reasons. Some stuff is marketed and then changed when it turns out to not work very well. That's certainly an excuse given for some of the missing stuff in No Man's Sky. From concept through to release, games constantly evolve, change, refocus, and become different beasts entirely. And generally that's okay, if the game turns out to be good. So where does this leave No Man's Sky? A game that, by most critical standards, turned out to be neither particularly good nor particularly bad. A game that has zealous fans, equally zealous haters, but also a lot of people in the middle confused that a simplistic crafting survival simulator ever got this much press. I'm fully confident that had No Man's Sky been an altogether better received game, a higher quality game, a game that was not just another crafting survival experience, the kind of which could be played for a dime a dozen on Steam Early Access, very little of the furor would have happened. Then again, a lot of this furor wouldn't have happened anyway if Hello Games hadn't cultivated and encouraged the hype surrounding this bafflingly over-exaggerated bit of software. I knew there was no way I could pronounce furor without making it sound like furor. 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 Ah, that's gonna be awkward. Because make no mistake, Hello Games is not innocent. Yes, it's a small 10-person team, but it was creating a $60 premium product with help from Sony, and it had a huge amount of eyes and ears hanging on its every word. There was no control over anything that was said, no attempt to corral Murray's promises, and even worse, very little direct communication after launch, when things got really ugly and people expected answers. Instead, Murray continued to put his foot in his mouth. Situations like promising there'd never be paid DLC in the game, only to have to walk that statement back days later and admit that, yeah, maybe there would be paid DLC in future. That last situation speaks volumes about the awful communication and dubious, fuzzy chatter that has come to exemplify No Man's Sky's scrambled PR message. People want to know what happened to No Man's Sky and nobody's saying shit. They want to know why it was presented as this, but it looks like this. They want to know whether Murray was ever playing the game when he held that controller in his hand on the Colbert Report. They want to know stuff, and the official lips have been shut tight whenever the awkward questions come out to play. Not a good look for a company being compared unfavourably to Gearbox by its harshest critics. Do I think Hello Games is as bad as Gearbox? No. I admit there's some personal shit there, since Randy did lie right to my face and pissed in the eyes of a sci-fi universe that's very dear to me, but even beyond the personal reasons, I do believe the studio was more naive, less cynical, and ultimately just bewildered as it found itself playing in a league it wasn't prepared for. But they are not innocent. At the very best, the comparisons people have made between Sean Murray and Peter Molyneux are apt, but I'm not sure even Molyneux talked so much bullshit about any one single game, and that is what Murray talked. Researching for this video, going back through the video interviews Murray did, not just from years ago, but mere months ago, he is seen talking such complete and utter shit so many times, regardless of motive, regardless of malice. That's the fact of the matter, and it's something I don't think anyone should forget the next time Hello Games has something to sell us. Whether you love it or hate it, whether you think Hello Games are malicious liars or over-ambitious dreamers, the fact of the matter is, Hello Games chatted shit.
Will you be able to play with your friends?
Yeah.
Is there a competitive element to this game?
Yeah, if you want that, yes.
I don't know, this is all a load of bollocks.
And this will be just one creature type, and there will be hundreds of creature types in the game, but each one of them will have, you know, practically infinite number of variations.
Can you customize the look of your character?
Sort of. You can see other characters, and they can see you. Which is a cool thing for players. Each one of them is pilotable. Each one of them will handle slightly differently. When you have a ship, it feels a little bit like it's your own.
Can you grief other players?
A little bit.
But actually going to a planet and another player being in the same space at the same time is incredibly rare. And it's something that, depending on how many people play the game, might not even happen, basically.
The only way for you to know what you look like is for somebody else to, you know, to see you.
Can you run into other people, other players on the game?
Yes, but the chances of that are incredibly rare, just because of the size of what we're building.
Wow.
Well, normally what you would do is you would hack into this. That would be the best way.
Okay.
But yes, you can have a really good standing with the NPCs, and they will just give you product recipes.
Okay, cool.
Do the animals eat each other?
Yeah, they do. And Day has turned it out because the planet has actually rotated on its axis, right? That's the thing that's really unique about this game.
Because you could just play the entire game as a trader if you
Right,
wanted to,
exactly.
right?
Yeah, just like a lot of space games, I could play the entire game just out in space. Right? Yeah. You could just fly about your ship forever.
Like here, we're at the boundary between two warring factions. I could join in, I could take sides.
those are real and they're there. You can kind of make out a continent, and some of those islands would be quite huge. Where are we going with this?
I don't know.
Is there?
Will the game be fun?
Yes.
Barring any amazing new revelations, that should be us bidding adieu on the Jimquisition to specific No Man's Sky topics, although the game itself will come up as an example in some subjects I've got planned in the future, which ultimately is the tragedy of No Man's Sky. I think it's not even been out for very long, and already talk of the game itself has sloughed away, leaving discussion of the game's history, the game's impact, the game's relevance to hype culture, the promises broken and kept. It's a game that's going to be talked about but not remembered as a game. Very much like something like Aliens Colonial Marines or something like that. Speaking of which, apparently, some of the trailers for No Man's Sky, even recent ones, were showing footage unrepresentative of the game, so that's not something I was able to get around to covering in the video proper. Has anyone coined Sean Murray yet? Like Sean Murray, though? Because if not, I'm calling dibs. I'm also saying, thank God for me.